Chapter 8. My God, thought Hendricks. Somehow she managed to stop short of saying it out loud. The other colonists already thought of her as the consummate ditz. She didn't want to add any more fuel to their fire. But it wasn't easy to be quiet now that she could see the thing on Pandor's face for herself. "They've got to get it off," said Gogolak, standing alongside Hendricks and gazing through the window of the infirmary. Hendricks was glad that someone had said it. "They will," Shepard assured them. "Don't worry." But his expression belied the confidence he espoused. Inside the infirmary, Pandor was stretched out on an examination table, surrounded by Philippakos and Angie. Every so often Pandor's hand twitched, letting his colleagues know he was still alive. But it was hard to believe. With that horrible thing on his face, how can he breathe? "Why don't they just cut the goddamn thing off?" Cody asked, his impatience evident in his voice. Normally, he was the most even-tempered of them, the guy who had a smile for everyone. But not now. Shepard glanced at him. "Be patient, Earl. We're all concerned about Elijah, and we'll know more about how to help him once Angie's finished examining him." As if on cue, Angie left Pandor's side and emerged from the infirmary. Removing her sanitary gloves, she tossed them in a refuse bin that came up to her waist. Angie looked tired as Hendricks had ever seen her. "Well?" asked Shepard. Hendricks looked at him, thinking, "Now who's the impatient one?" But she didn't say that either. "Pandor's alive," Angie said in her odd little girl's voice. "But he's in a paralytic coma, induced, apparently, by a toxin that thing injected into him." "Paralytic," Cody repeated. "So how's he breathing?" Yes, thought Hendricks. How? That was what she had wanted to know all along. Angie frowned. "The thing is doing Pandor's breathing for him, bringing in oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide." "Shit," said Gogolak, her brow creasing down the middle. "So if you take it off..." "Pandor dies," said Angie, "which is why we've decided to leave it on, at least for the time being." "But not indefinitely," Gogolak suggested hopefully. "Unfortunately," said Angie, "it's not just a respiration problem. Even if we find an antidote for the toxin, the thing has an appendage shoved down Pandor's throat, all the way to his lungs, judging from our scans. If we try to yank it out, it could take half his throat with it." "I don't get it," said Saigo, a razor-thin, balding man whose breath smelled like sour milk. "Why would something affix itself to Pandor's face, put him into a coma, and then keep him alive?" "Oh my God," said Hendricks. Everyone looked at her. She had tried so hard not to blurt it out, but it came out anyway, and now she had to explain. "It just occurred to me," she said as calmly and clinically as she could. "What if it wants to eat him?" Cody planted his hand against the wall and started to gag. Putting a hand on the botanist's shoulder, Shepard frowned at Hendricks. "No one's going to get eaten," he said. Then he turned to Angie. "Am I right?" Angie's lips pressed together for a moment. "No," she said at last. "There's been no indication of a problem in that regard." But she can't rule it out. Hendricks could read that between the lines. It could be eating him. As for why else the thing might have latched onto him, said Angie, well, your guess is as good as mine. This is some kind of alien life form, however primitive. Its biological imperatives may be different from anything we've ever encountered. We've got to help him, said Gogolak. Somehow. What about the rest of us? Said Saigo. Are we in danger of the same thing happening to us? I don't think so, said Shepard. There was only one ovoid in the tube. I made sure of that. That seemed to satisfy everyone except Saigo. What if another one of those things crawled out before you got there? He pressed. What if it's hiding in a corner, waiting for one of us to stumble on it? I searched the bay, Shepard noted. There was nothing else in there. You can't be sure of that, said Saigo. The damn thing's not that big. It could be hiding anywhere. He's right, Hendricks reflected. Shepard can't be sure. Just like Angie can't be sure that thing's not eating Pandor. She imagined herself in the dimly lit supply bay, looking for a set of pruning shears. She could see herself approaching the tool cabinet, pulling out the drawer where the shears were kept, and seeing something egg-shaped inside it. Something leathery-looking that, as she watched, spellbound, split at the top and ejected something at her face. Something small and gooey and insanely strong. Hendricks shivered. It was too terrible to even think about. It was then that Angie's father came out of the exam room. A gentle, paunchy man with a mane of grey hair and a beard to match, Philippakos looked stricken. Angie's told you Pandor's status? He asked. Yeah, she did, said Shepard. I have some concerns about there being more of those things around, said Saigo. Shepard's precautions to the contrary. The question, said Gogolak, who could be relentless when she wanted something, is what we're going to do for Pandor, here and now. Philippakos nodded. I feel the same way, but he's stable at least, and until we know more about this creature, it would be unwise to do anything that might jeopardize Pandor's survival. Cody shook his head. I don't like it. None of us does, said Angie, but we've got to think with our heads, not our hearts. What if your tests don't show up anything useful? Asked Gogolak. What do we do then? Angie started to answer, then seemed to think better of it. It was her father who said, We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. No one had a better idea, so it ended there. But with the exception of Saigo, who said he had work to do, none of them left. They stayed and peered through the observation window, alone with their respective thoughts. Hendrix's was, At least I kept my mouth shut most of the time. Simone hadn't been able to get Ripley or Call to tell him where their ship was headed. However, he hadn't tracked down a legend strictly through luck. He was good at biding his time, and he was even better at keeping his eyes and ears open. And eventually, those qualities stood him in good stead on the Betty as well. Simone had just come from another one-sided conversation with Crack and was on his way to his room when he heard voices coming through its open doorway. Stopping just shy of it, he listened more closely. There's only one voice, he decided. Vriess's. But there were deep moans of satisfaction alternating with the little man's remarks, and those seemed to be coming from someone else. At least, Simone hoped they were. "Makes my blood boil," said Vriess. Said a feminine voice. "Mine too." Bolero, Simone thought. Definitely Bolero. "I'm talking about the aliens," said Vriess. "After what happened on the Auriga." "Yes," Bolero hissed. "Keep going." "You'd think nobody would be stupid enough to mess with the slimy son of a bitches again. But I guess there's no shortage of stupidity out there." "Oh, if you say so," Bolero responded. "A little to the right, lover. Oh, that's it." Simone wondered if they knew the door was open. And he wondered even more what Bolero saw in a paraplegic. But he could ponder those questions later. "Some good people got snuffed by those monsters," said Vriess. "Elgin, for instance. I told you about Elgin." "Oh, you did," Bolero groaned. "He's the one who got me interested in this." Bolero gasped. "And this," said Vriess. "Oh, God," she whimpered. "And they goddamn killed him. Me too, almost. And now the same thing's going to happen all over again unless we stop it." "No," she said in a high, thin voice. "Oh, don't stop it, lover. Please don't stop." Simone swallowed. He felt like a peeping Tom, which wasn't altogether a bad thing. Besides, he had no choice. He had to listen, to pick up whatever tidbits they gave him. "You like it this way, don't you?" Vriess asked. "Oh, God," she said. "I do." "How about like this?" he asked, his voice thickening. "Yes," Bolero breathed. "Yes, more than anything." Simone was so absorbed in their sex play, he didn't know he was being watched as well, until someone behind him bellowed with indignation, spinning him around. Without meaning to, he had also taken a step backward. It placed him directly in line with the open doorway, through which he got a clear if undesired picture of Vriess and Bolero. The pilot was lying on the little man's bed, face down, with one of her naked feet in his lap and the other in his attentive hands. A foot massage, Simone thought, feeling foolish as hell. He's giving her a goddamn foot massage. "What the hell are you doing?" Vriess demanded. "I'd like to hear that myself," said Bolero, dragging a sweaty lock of hair from her forehead. But that wasn't the worst of it, because it seemed Jonah was the one who had yelled at Simone, and he was striding down the corridor to confront him. Or worse. Simone turned back to Vriess and Bolero and said, "Sorry?" Then, before Jonah could reach him, the reporter made a beeline for the room Ripley shared with Call and Bolero. The door was closed, of course, but it would slide aside at his approach, offering him shelter. Unless Ripley or Call was inside and had activated the lock. Then he would be stuck out in the corridor with Jonah, and he really didn't want to think about that. Unfortunately for Simone, the door didn't budge when he got near. As Jonah approached him, a savage smile on his face, the reporter pounded on the metal door with the flat of his hand. "Please," he thought, "let Ripley be inside." Jonah put a hand on Simone's shoulder and spun him around. "Where are you going, pervert?" I didn't mean to," Simone began. Before he could finish, he heard the door slide open behind him. "Oh, thank God," he thought. But when he turned to explain the situation, he realized it wasn't Ripley who had opened the door. It was Call. "What's going on?" she asked. "Why, nothing," said Jonah, putting his arm around Simone's shoulders. "Me and the sneak here, we're just having a little heart-to-heart." Call frowned. "Ripley will be pissed if you kill him, even by accident." "How about if I just pull his arms off?" "Go back to your cage," Call told him. Cursing to himself, Jonah went back where he came from. Simone turned to his savior. "Thanks." "The next time I catch you eavesdropping," said Call, "I'll pull your arms off myself. Understand?" The reporter nodded. "Absolutely." But he was thinking, "If you told me what you were up to, I wouldn't have to eavesdrop, would I?" Pandor opened his eyes and cursed, but instead of sound coming from his mouth, a bubble squirted out. "God," he thought, "where am I?" He was immersed in water somehow, water that was warm and red like blood, if a little thinner, and his lungs were screaming for air. If he didn't get some soon, he would drown. He didn't know how he had wound up there. He just knew he had to find the surface, but which way was up? Spinning around frantically, Pandor caught sight of a patch of light. It was vague, diffuse, but it seemed to him it might be the sun. And he had to try something, damn it. He couldn't just hang there until his goddamn air ran out. Swimming as hard as he could, he speared through the water in the direction of the light, but he didn't seem to be making any progress. The light just shimmered in front of him, teasing him, leading him on. Redoubling his efforts, he became less streamlined, less efficient, and his efforts depleted his oxygen even faster. His arms and legs got weak, rubbery, and he felt the urge to pull something down his throat. But he didn't want to die, and more than that, he didn't want to die with his throat full of water. So he hung on, and kicked, and stroked for the light, while darkness closed in around the edges of his vision. Suddenly, without warning, he broke the surface. Unable to help himself any longer, he sucked in as hard as he could, making a keening sound like a soul lost in the depths of hell. And found himself sitting upright in a bed, cold sweat bathing his face, white light all around him. Squinting, he discerned shapes in the light, or maybe just one shape. It was hard to tell. "Pandor?" someone said. The voice was feminine, girlish in pitch, and he recognized it. "Angie?" he returned. Then his eyes began to adjust to the light, and he saw that he was in the infirmary, with someone in a white lab coat standing beside him. It was Angie, all right, and she looked deeply concerned. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Am I okay?" Pandor echoed stupidly, taking stock of himself. "Not completely." He felt bruised, beaten. His muscles were trembling, and his throat hurt like 1,000 flaming hells. He was dry, too, so dry that it felt as if all the water had been sucked out of him. "Are you all right, Elijah?" Angie pressed, a little more concern in her voice this time. Pandor tried to tell her, but his throat wouldn't cooperate. It was too parched, too swollen for him to push any words out. Finally, with a considerable effort, he managed to whisper a single, urgent word. "Water." "Get him some water," said Angie, looking back at someone. A moment later, she raised a yellow plastic cup to his lips. As she tipped it, Pandor felt a cold, wet trickle in his mouth and gulped it down greedily. But it wasn't enough, not nearly. Grabbing the cup, he sucked down the rest of its contents, or rather, the portion that didn't stream down his face and wet his chest. He could feel the moisture spreading through his tissues like an elixir. It opened his throat enough for him to speak more easily. Trying to catch his breath as he thrust the cup back at Angie, Pandor croaked, "More." She gave him more, and he guzzled that down as well, and a third cupful, at which point he realized it was Shepard supplying the water, and a fourth, after which he stopped counting. At last he lay back into his pillow and asked, in a more lubricated voice, "What happened to me?" Angie frowned. "I was about to ask you the same thing. Shepard found you laid out in the supply bay with some kind of creature attached to your face." Pandor felt his cheek. It was irritated, tender to the touch. A creature? On my face? But outside of Rex, there were no creatures in the domes. Where did it come from? "You don't remember?" asked Shepard. "If I knew, would I have asked?" "We think it arrived in the cryo shipment," Angie told him. "There was a big leathery egg tucked into one end of the tube. Its top was split open, and its insides were coated with a sticky white goo, the same we found on the creature." "Do you have it?" he asked. The creature, I mean." "It's dead," said Angie. "But yes, we have it." "I want to see it," he told her. "You will," she assured him. "How do you feel?" asked Shepard. "Awful," said Pandor. "My joints especially. Like I've fallen down a flight of steps and hit some of them twice." "Probably all you need is rest," said Angie. She glanced at Shepard. "We'll let him sleep." But Pandor didn't feel the least bit sleepy. He said so. "What I really need is—" "More water?" said Shepard, anticipating. "No," said Pandor. "Food. All of a sudden, I've got a pit in my stomach the size of a nickel excavation." "Well, in that case," said Shepard, "you're in luck. Dinner's in 45 minutes. 45? Pandor shook his head. "I can't wait that long." Shepard smiled sympathetically. "Don't worry, I'll dig something up for you." He glanced at Angie. "That is, if it's all right with your physician?" Angie mulled it over for a moment, then shrugged her narrow shoulders. "I don't see why not. Just go slow, all right? You haven't had anything in your stomach for a long time." Out of curiosity, Pandor asked, "How long exactly?" Angie frowned. 2 days. Pandor swallowed. 2 days? Are you kidding? She shook her head from side to side. "To be honest," she said, a pang evident in her voice, We weren't completely sure you were going to make it." "But he did," Shepard interjected. "And that's the important thing. Now, get some rest," he told Pandor, "and I'll see what I can dig up in the way of something edible." "Yeah, all right," said Pandor. And he lay back in his bed. But he found he wasn't comfortable closing his eyes, because as much as his senses told him otherwise, he still had the feeling he was drowning. In Ripley's recurring nightmare, she was only half conscious, but she could feel herself locked in an intricate lattice of hot, hard flesh, a seething mass in which every seemingly random movement was balanced by some other. Perfect harmony, she thought. If she allowed herself to drift a little deeper, she would be hopelessly and irretrievably lost. As it was, a carefully buried part of her responded to the airband flow of the lattice. It longed to writhe as the bodies around her were writhing, with languid ease and an almost sexual abandon. The scent in her nostrils was sharp, fragrant, so compelling she could barely resist it. But she didn't belong here. She was human, damn it. Forcing her eyes open, Ripley looked around. She was immersed in a wall-to-wall hive full of slumbering aliens, the one to which she had woken years earlier, after she had been wrenched from the company of Call and the others and dragged down to the Hades of Auriga's waste chamber. The bodies around her slid restlessly, moving independently, but as one, a nest of cold-blooded serpents taking pleasure in the sinuous proximity of their kind. They were alien, unknowable, and yet unspeakably familiar. A queen towered over the nest, imperious, angular, and alert, and burdened by a belly so immense and bloated it seemed independent of her. It was hard to believe a creature like the Queen had ever been a passenger in Ripley's body. In fact, that was the reason Ripley had been created from a smear of blood, to give birth to the Queen lodged in the original Ripley before she died. Suddenly, the Queen arched her spine with a to that point unknown kind of pain. A shriek tore from her mouth and echoed in the chamber, signaling that her long-waited birth pangs were upon her. The nest shuddered with her. She was about to produce the next generation of killing machine, the next wave of silent, slavering death, and there was a subtle celebration of the prospect in the alien's rhythms. "It's a dream," Ripley reminded herself, shrinking from the Queen's obscenely swollen belly and the ripples visible under its flesh. "Just a dream. You've been through this before." The Queen in the waste chamber had given birth to a monstrosity, an alien male corrupted with Ripley's human DNA, his cavernous eye sockets and gaping maw giving him the aspect of a living death's head. Confused by the conflicting signals in his brain, love, protect, kill, he had basked in the presence of the female who gave him life, then lashed out with his claw and cut her open. But this newborn would be different. Ripley knew that with a certainty that transcended any reasonable method of gathering and processing information. As the Queen's progeny punctured her sac and began ferocious birth struggles, Ripley tried desperately to squirm away from it. But she couldn't. It was her destiny to remain there, to bear witness to this awful and monstrous event. After all, she was the Queen's mother, in a way. Whatever came out of that alien was Ripley's responsibility as well. The Queen shrieked, knowing something was wrong, but she couldn't do anything about it. She was as spellbound as Ripley, as transfixed by the birth taking place before her. Little by little, the newborn wrestled itself out of the alien's belly, its neck muscles standing out like steel cords, its naked pallor covered only with a veneer of viscous, white-yellow goop. Only when it had pulled its foot out and was entirely free did it look around at the world it had entered, its head making little jerking movements as it took it all in. But this thing that had emerged into the darkness wasn't alien at all. It was infinitely worse, infinitely colder and crueler than any alien ever spawned. It was a man. And not just any man. It was the one called Wren, who had schemed to grow a Ripley clone from preserved cells so that he could obtain the alien gestating inside her. The bastard who had ignored the pain and infirmity of helpless, twisted beings in single-minded pursuit of his unholy objective. Because before Wren created his perfect Ripley, he spawned a generation of failed attempts, each one racked by its mixed alien and human heritage in a different way. All but one of these grotesqueries died in burbling agony. The unlucky one lived until Ripley stumbled on her and incinerated her. She could still see the flames devouring the poor, hideous thing, enabling her to escape the misery of her existence. But none of that had mattered to Wren. All he cared about was the recognition he would get, the accolades that would be due to him as the man who resurrected the aliens. If Ripley had a father, it was Wren, and she hated him as she had never hated anyone else. Now she glared at the all-too-human monster hunkering on the Queen's punctured belly. He grinned as he had when she first met him, confident in his superiority. Ripley's anger rose into her throat and stuck there, leaving her to choke on it. She could tolerate a lifeform driven by instinct to kill, but Wren had chosen to inflict pain and death. And in Ripley's eyes, there was no excuse for that. In her dream logic, she decided she couldn't let him live to bring pain to others. She had to end his existence, there and then, finally and irrevocably. Slowly, so Wren wouldn't notice, she slipped free from the press of alien bodies. Then she crawled across them as lightly as she could, careful not to disturb any of them. Wren, meanwhile, turned to the Queen and bestowed a big smile on her. A smile of gratitude, apparently, for giving him life. Then, like the newborn on the Auriga, he slashed her throat open with a swipe of his claw, sending her blood flying across the room in gouts of metal-eating acid. Ripley felt it eat into her skin, gouging it to the bone, but she ignored the pain, knowing her flesh would grow back. It was her opportunity that might be lost forever. While Wren was still gloating over his kill, she continued to negotiate the shrugging sea of bodies. Little by little, she bridged the gap separating her from her objective, until finally she came within striking distance. Gathering herself, she sprang, but before she could sink her nails into Wren's neck, he whirled and snatched her by the throat. Then he grinned in her face, insanely, maniacally. "How's our number 8 today?" he asked her, as civilly as if they were having tea. Ripley clawed at his hand, but couldn't budge it. He was too strong, too determined. Gradually, he cut off her air, inviting the darkness to close in on her. "No," she thought. "Kill you. I'll kill you." Wren ran his hand across the protruding ribs of his cavernous torso, obviously pleased with what he found there, and said, "You should be very proud." Ripley kicked at him, tattooing his chest with her fury. But it didn't help. Ren just stood there choking the life out of her until the darkness closed down altogether. But even then, she struggled, and as she did so, she heard a voice. Not Ren's, she realized. Someone else's. "Ripley!" it said. She followed it through the darkness, hunting it, drawn by it, and opened her eyes to the pale spill of starlight through the unshielded observation port by her bed. Why am I awake? She wondered. "Ripley!" came a voice over the intercom. Vriess, she thought. He had pulled helm duty that night. Instantly, she came alert. She could see everything, hear everything, smell everything, and feel everything. Even the soft, almost imperceptible caress of ventilation on her naked flesh. "What is it?" she asked. "They're here," said Vriess. Ripley knew exactly what he meant by they. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe a little less." 10 minutes. After anticipating this moment for years. "Tell the others," she told him. "Right away," said Vriess, and cut the link. Ripley swung her legs out of bed, got to her feet, and walked across the room. En route, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror that had belonged to Elgin, the Betty's previous captain. By human standards, she was impressive. Tall, hard-muscled, agile. What Ren had called an unparalleled blend of strength and coordination. She could do things other humans couldn't, endure punishment that would kill anyone else. When it came to alien standards, because she could apply those just as easily, she was equally impressive. But not because of her physical attributes. The aliens didn't have sight organs after all. To them, she was impressive because she could think. They liked that about her, respected her for it. It was what had enabled her to survive the onslaught of the aliens on the Auriga, and that of the newborn in particular. And it was what would enable her to survive the present threat. Continuing to the other side of the room, she removed her clothes from a hook and slipped them on. Then she picked up her hand burner and tucked it into her belt. Ready, she thought. But then she had been born ready. Literally.